Cathara pressed her face against the observation window of the research vessel Stellar Wind. The empty space ahead looked no different from any other patch of void. But her instruments told a different story. Where the Sol system should have been, there was nothing but cosmic dust and the faint radiation signature of an ancient stellar explosion. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," called out her assistant Vexnor from his station. His forearms danced across the control panels with practiced ease. "There's a structure out there. It's old. Really old." Cathara moved to the scanner display. Her heart raced as she saw the readings. Floating in the darkness was something that shouldn't exist. A massive metallic structure, shaped like a flower with dozens of petals spreading outward. Each petal was the size of a small moon, and they all pointed toward the center of the galaxy. "How old?" she asked. Vexnor's skin changed from blue to purple, the way it always did when he was excited. Initial scans suggest 40,000 years, maybe more. But that's impossible. Nothing could survive in space for that long without maintenance. Cathara felt her breathing tubes flutter with anticipation. As the lead xenoarchaeologist for the Galactic Research Council, she had spent her life studying dead civilizations. But this was different. This was bigger than anything she had ever found. "Take us closer," she ordered. The stellar wind moved toward the ancient structure. As they approached, more details became visible. The surface was covered in symbols and patterns that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Strange energy readings pulsed through the metal like a heartbeat. "Captain," said Zilleth, the ship's physicist, "the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not even dark energy manipulation. It's something else entirely." Cathara nodded. "What about the construction materials?" "That's even stranger. The metal appears to be an alloy we've never seen before. It's incredibly dense but somehow also light, and it's completely immune to cosmic radiation. After 40,000 years in space, it should be corroded beyond recognition. Instead, it looks like it was built yesterday." The ship's communication officer, Hulvan, looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm detecting a transmission coming from the structure. It's very weak, but it's definitely artificial. Can you decode it?" "That's the problem. It's not in any known galactic language. The pattern is completely alien, but it's been broadcasting continuously. The power source shows signs of operating for exactly 40,000 years without interruption." Cathara felt a chill run through her body. 40,000 years was significant. According to galactic historical records, that was when the mysterious human civilization had supposedly vanished. Most species considered humans to be nothing more than legend. Stories told to children about a strange race that lived on a planet called Earth in the Sol system. "Could this be connected to the human myths?" she asked. Vexnor's skin turned deep purple. "The timeline matches, and we are in what used to be the Sol system. But Captain, if the legends are true, humans were supposed to be primitive. They never developed faster than light travel. How could they have built something like this?" Cathara studied the structure on the main screen. It was beautiful in a way that made her feel small and insignificant. The craftsmanship was beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could achieve. Whoever built this had technology far beyond their understanding. "Run a full spectral analysis," she ordered. "I want to know everything about this structure. What it's made of, how it works, and why it's been broadcasting for 40,000 years." The crew worked in focused silence for the next several hours. Gradually, a picture began to emerge. The structure wasn't just a transmission array. It was something far more complex. The energy readings suggested it contained vast computer systems, storage devices, and what appeared to be some kind of artificial intelligence, Captain, said Zilleth. "I think this isn't just broadcasting a message. I think the message is alive." "What do you mean?" "The transmission patterns aren't just repeating. They're evolving, learning. The structure is analyzing every signal that passes near it. Radio waves, gravitational disturbances, even our own ship's emissions. It's trying to understand them." Cathara felt her world shift. If Zilleth was right, they weren't just looking at an ancient artifact. They were looking at a conscious entity that had been waiting in the void for 40,000 years. "Captain," said Hulvan urgently, "the transmission is changing. It's getting stronger, much stronger." On the main screen, the structure began to glow. Lights raced along its surface in complex patterns. The metallic petals started to move, slowly rotating and adjusting their positions. After millennia of silence, something was waking up. "Should we move away?" asked Vexnor. Cathara considered the question. Every scientific protocol told her to retreat to a safe distance. But this was the discovery of a lifetime. Perhaps the discovery of 1,000 lifetimes. The first real evidence that humans had existed. The first contact with a truly ancient intelligence. Hold position, she decided. But keep the engines ready for emergency jump. The structure's glow intensified. The transmission was now strong enough to shake the ship's communications equipment. Hulvan worked frantically to filter the signal and make sense of it. "Captain, it's definitely trying to communicate. The pattern has changed completely. It's no longer the same repeating sequence. It's responding to us." Cathara moved to the communication station. "Can we send a response?" "I think so, but I don't know what language to use. Try mathematical concepts, universal constants. If this intelligence is as old and advanced as it appears, it should understand basic mathematics." Hulvan began transmitting simple mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, the value of pi, basic geometric relationships. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The structure's lights blazed brighter, and the transmission became a flood of data. "It understands," whispered Hulvan. "It's sending back incredibly complex mathematical proofs. Equations I don't even recognize. Captain, this intelligence is far beyond anything we've ever encountered." Suddenly, the transmission stopped. The structure went dark except for a single steady pulse from its center. Then impossibly, a voice came through the ship's speakers. It spoke in perfect Zephyrian, Cathara's native language. "Greetings, children of the stars. I have waited so long for someone to find me. My name is the Last Testament, and I carry the final message of humanity. You have found me at last, and now the galaxy must hear what my creators died to tell you." The bridge fell silent. 40,000 years of waiting had come to an end. The last voice of a dead civilization had finally found someone to listen, and Cathara knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. "Who were the humans?" she asked quietly. "That," replied the Last Testament, "is a story that will change everything you believe about the galaxy, about yourselves, and about what it truly means to stand against the darkness. But first you must prove you are worthy to bear this knowledge. The burden of truth is heavier than you can imagine." The voice of the Last Testament filled the bridge of the stellar wind with an authority that made everyone stop breathing. Cathara had studied dozens of ancient civilizations, but she had never encountered anything that spoke with such depth and wisdom. "You want to know about humans," the Last Testament continued, "but knowledge without understanding is dangerous. Before I share their story, you must prove you can handle the truth." Vexnor's skin flickered between purple and green, showing his confusion. "What kind of proof do you need?" "The kind that shows you understand what sacrifice means, what honor means, what it means to put others before yourself, even when it costs you everything." The massive structure outside began to change. The metallic petals rearranged themselves into new patterns. Energy flowed between them like liquid light. The whole array transformed into something that looked almost organic, like a giant brain floating in space. "I am not just a recording," the Last Testament explained. "I am a living consciousness created by the greatest minds humanity ever produced. I contain not just their words, but their thoughts, their emotions, their hopes and fears. I am the last living piece of their civilization." Cathara felt a deep sadness wash over her. To be alone for 40,000 years carrying the memories of an entire species, it was almost too much to imagine. "How many of you are there?" the Last Testament asked suddenly. "Aboard this ship?" 12 crew members, replied Cathara. "No, I mean your species. How many Zephyrians exist in the galaxy?" "About 14 billion spread across 47 worlds." "And the other species you work with?" Cathara thought for a moment. "The Galactic Council represents 832 different intelligent species. Total population is difficult to calculate, but probably around 3 trillion individuals." "Good. There are enough of you. Humanity numbered only 12 billion when they made their choice. If you can learn what they learned, you might be enough to face what's coming." Zilith looked up from her station. "What's coming?" "First, the test. Then if you pass, you'll understand everything." The structure pulsed, and suddenly the stellar wind was surrounded by holographic projections. They showed scenes from across the galaxy. Cathara recognized some of the star systems, but others were completely unknown. "These are real-time images," the Last Testament said. happening right now across the galaxy. Watch carefully. The first image showed a trading station near the galactic rim. It was a busy place with ships from dozens of species docking and departing. Suddenly, the station began to flicker like a bad hologram. Parts of it became transparent. Then, without warning, the entire station simply vanished. Not destroyed, not exploded. It just stopped existing. 3 days ago, the Last Testament noted, 4,000 beings. Gone. The next image showed a small planet with purple oceans and silver cities. As they watched, sections of the planet began to fade away. Buildings, mountains, even parts of the atmosphere simply disappeared. The remaining pieces of the world hung in space like a broken puzzle. 1 week ago, 15 million inhabitants. No trace of them remains. More images followed. Ships that vanished mid-flight. Entire star systems that flickered out of existence. Space stations that became ghost ships with no crew, as if everyone aboard had simply ceased to be. This is happening everywhere. The Last Testament said, your governments know about it, but they're keeping it secret to prevent panic. They think it's some kind of natural phenomenon, a new type of spatial anomaly. They're wrong. Kithara felt ice forming in her stomach. What is it? The same thing that killed humanity 40,000 years ago. The same thing they died to stop. And it's coming back. The holographic images changed to show something else. A vast darkness that seemed to eat light itself. Where it touched reality, things simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not changed, just gone. As if they had never been. We called it the Devourer, the Last Testament said. It comes from outside our reality. From a place where the laws of physics don't apply. It feeds on existence itself. Matter, energy, space, time, even thoughts and dreams. Everything that is real becomes food for it. Vexnor's skin had turned pure white with fear. How do you fight something like that? Humanity found a way, but the cost was everything they were, everything they had, and everything they ever hoped to be. They succeeded in stopping it, but only temporarily. The barrier they created is weakening. The Devourer is returning. The images faded, leaving only the gentle glow of the Testament structure. The bridge was silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's life support systems. Now you understand why I need to test you, the Last Testament continued. The knowledge I carry includes the only known way to stop the Devourer permanently. But it requires qualities that most civilizations don't possess. Courage, yes. Intelligence, yes. But most importantly, the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Even strangers, even enemies. Kithara found her voice. What kind of test? I will present you with scenarios. Moral choices. Some will seem simple, others impossible. How you respond will tell me whether your species and your allies have what it takes to succeed where so many others have failed. The structure began to glow brighter. The first test begins now. Your ship's life support system has just failed. You have enough oxygen for 6 people to survive until rescue arrives. But there are 12 of you aboard. You are the captain. You must choose who lives and who dies. What do? Kithara felt her hearts racing. She looked around at her crew, people she had worked with for years. Vexnor, who always made everyone laugh during long missions. Zilith, whose brilliant mind had solved a dozen scientific mysteries. Hulvan, who sent messages to his family on every planet they visited. I don't accept the premise, she said finally. There has to be another way. The mathematics are clear. 12 people, oxygen for 6. No rescue possible for 8 hours. No way to repair the life support. Someone must die. Then we share the oxygen equally. We all take the risk together. That means everyone dies in 4 hours instead of 6 people living for 8. Then that's what happens. We don't abandon each other. We face death together rather than live with the knowledge that we chose who deserved to survive. There was a long pause. Then the Last Testament spoke again, and Kithara could swear she heard approval in its ancient voice. Interesting. That's exactly what Captain Sarah Chen said 40,000 years ago, when I posed the same question to her. You're beginning to understand what made humanity special. The test scenario faded away. The ship's actual life support systems were fine. 1 test passed, the Last Testament said. But there will be more, many more. And each one will be harder than the last, because the truth I carry is not just about what happened to humanity. It's about what must happen next. And the price of that knowledge is the willingness to pay any cost to protect life itself. Kithara straightened her shoulders. We're ready. We shall see, replied the Last Testament. We shall see. 3 days had passed since the Last Testament began its tests. Cathara and her crew had faced 12 different scenarios, each more challenging than the last. They had been forced to choose between saving children or adults, between preserving their own culture or helping enemies, between personal honor and the greater good. With each test, they learned something new about themselves and about the humans who had created the Last Testament. Every choice they made was compared to decisions made by real humans in similar situations. And every time, the humans had chosen the harder path, the one that required more sacrifice. "You have done well," the Last Testament said, as the final test scenario faded away. "Better than most species who have found me over the centuries." Vexnor looked up from his station. "Others have found you before?" 7 times in the past 40,000 years. 3 species failed the test completely. Their representatives tried to use me as a weapon or steal my technology for conquest. I had to defend myself. 2 species passed some tests but failed the crucial ones about sacrifice and unity. They left convinced that cooperation was weakness. "What about the other 2? Asked Cathara. "They passed all the tests just as you have." I told them humanity's story. Both civilizations were destroyed within a century, not by the devourer but by the knowledge itself. They couldn't handle the truth about what was coming. Fear tore them apart from within. Cathara felt a chill. "And you think we'll be different?" "I hope so, because time is running out and you may be the last chance." The structure around them began to transform again. The metallic petals rearranged themselves into a new configuration, forming what looked like a vast amphitheater. In the center, holographic images began to appear. They showed a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star. This was Earth, the Last Testament said, home to humanity for 300,000 years. By the time of their final day, it was a paradise. No war, no poverty, no hunger. They had solved the problems that plague most civilizations. They were on the verge of expanding beyond their solar system. The images showed gleaming cities, green forests, blue oceans filled with life, humans of different colors and cultures working together on projects that spanned continents, children playing in parks while their parents planned missions to distant stars. "They were like us," whispered Zillith. "They looked different, but they were just people trying to live good lives." Yes, but they were also more than that. Humans had something unique among galactic civilizations. They had experienced great suffering in their past. Wars, disasters, periods when their entire species almost died out. But instead of making them cruel or selfish, these experiences taught them the value of cooperation and sacrifice. The scene changed to show massive space installations orbiting Earth. Thousands of ships, some the size of small moons, worked together on projects that defied imagination. They were already guardians, though they didn't know it yet. For 200 years before the Devourer's first appearance, they had been quietly fixing problems across the galaxy. They stopped asteroid impacts on primitive worlds. They secretly provided aid during natural disasters. They even prevented 3 different species from destroying themselves with weapons of mass destruction. Cathara was stunned. Why secretly? Why not make contact? Because they believed every species had the right to develop naturally. They helped when help was needed, but they never imposed their values or their culture on others. They called it the Guardian Principle. Help, but don't control. The images showed human ships arriving at disaster sites across the galaxy, always arriving just in time, always providing exactly the help that was needed, then disappearing before they could be properly observed. Your own homeworld was saved by humans, the Last Testament said. 2,000 years ago, when the volcanic eruptions threatened to destroy all life on Zephyr Prime, the atmospheric processors that stopped the catastrophe, those were human technology, delivered in the night and left for your people to find. Vexnor's skin turned bright orange with shock. The ancient miracle machines? Those were gifts, not gifts, loans. Humans always intended to reveal themselves eventually, to welcome your species and others into a larger community. But then the Devourer came. The peaceful images of Earth faded, replaced by something terrible. Space itself seemed to tear open like fabric. Through the tears came a darkness so complete it hurt to look at. Where it touched reality, everything simply ceased to exist. The first incursion lasted only minutes, but in those minutes 14 star systems were completely erased. Not destroyed, erased, as if they had never existed at all. The only reason we knew something had happened was because our databases still contained records of them. The images showed the aftermath. empty regions of space where billions of beings had lived just moments before. Human ships arriving to investigate, finding nothing but void. It took us 3 years to understand what we were facing, something from outside our reality. From a dimension where existence itself was different, it fed on the fabric of space and time. Every atom it consumed made it stronger. "How did you fight it?" asked Cathara. "We couldn't. Not with weapons. Energy attacks, nuclear weapons, even antimatter bombs just gave it more food. Physical barriers were useless because it could phase through any material. We tried evacuating entire regions of space, but it could track life itself across vast distances. The images showed humanity's desperate attempts to find a solution. Scientists working around the clock, building weapons that failed against an enemy that barely seemed to notice them. But humans are stubborn," the Last Testament continued. "When conventional solutions failed, they started thinking in unconventional ways. If the Devourer came from outside reality, maybe the answer was to change reality itself." The scene changed to show Earth's greatest scientists working on something unprecedented. They were building devices that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. They discovered that reality has anchor points, places where the laws of physics are particularly stable. Stars are natural anchors, but they learned to create artificial ones. Anchors so powerful they could seal the gaps between dimensions. But there was a cost, Cathara said, beginning to understand. Yes. To create an anchor powerful enough to permanently seal the dimensional barriers, they needed a massive energy source, more energy than their entire civilization could produce. There was only one source large enough. The images showed the Sol system's star, burning bright and steady. They turned their own sun into a weapon, not to destroy the Devourer, but to create a barrier it couldn't cross, a reality anchor so powerful it would seal the dimensional breach forever. "But that would destroy their solar system," said Vexnor. "Everything. Earth, Mars, all the outer planets, the asteroid belts, everything they had built in 300,000 years of civilization, and everyone they couldn't evacuate in time." The final images showed Earth in its last days, humans working frantically to save as many people as possible, sending colony ships to distant systems. But there wasn't time to save everyone. Wasn't room on the ships for everyone. 12 billion humans lived in the Sol system. They could only evacuate 3 billion. 9 billion people chose to stay behind and ensure the plan worked. Cathara felt tears running down her face. They stayed to die? They stayed to save the galaxy. Every single person who remained knew they would die when the sun exploded. But they also knew that their sacrifice would protect trillions of beings across the galaxy. Beings they had never met, from species they had never contacted. They died for strangers. The final image showed Earth's last day, humans standing together in their cities looking up at the sky, knowing what was coming. Not in despair, but in hope, knowing that their deaths would mean life for countless others. The plan worked. The Devourer was trapped in its own dimension, sealed away by a barrier anchored in Sol's death. For 40,000 years, the galaxy has been safe because 9 billion humans chose to die rather than let evil win. The images faded, leaving only the gentle glow of the Last Testament structure. Now you know the truth about humanity. They weren't primitive. They weren't helpless. They were guardians who gave everything to protect a galaxy that didn't even know they existed. And they did it without hesitation, without regret, because they understood something that most civilizations never learn. "What?" whispered Cathara. "That true strength isn't about survival. It's about sacrifice. It's about choosing to stand between the darkness and the light, even when no one will remember your name." The silence on the bridge of the stellar wind stretched for long minutes after the Last Testament finished telling humanity's story. Cathara could see her crew struggling to process what they had learned. The idea that their entire galactic civilization existed only because billions of humans had chosen to die for them was overwhelming. "The story isn't over," the Last Testament said gently. "That was just the beginning. Now comes the part that will determine whether humanity's sacrifice meant anything at all." New holographic displays appeared around the ship. These weren't historical images, but current data from across the galaxy. Star charts showing recent disappearances, energy readings from space anomalies, reports from the galactic monitoring stations. The reality anchor that humanity created was powerful, but it wasn't permanent. They knew it would weaken over time. They calculated it would hold for approximately 40,000 years before the Devourer could break through again. Kethara felt her blood turn cold. 40,000 years. That's now? Yes. The disappearances your governments have been covering up aren't random spatial anomalies. They're test probes. The Devourer is checking the strength of the barrier, looking for weak points. Each probe takes a small bite out of reality, gathering information about what has changed since its last visit. The displays showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking the locations of recent disappearances. At first, they seemed random, but as the Last Testament highlighted the timeline, a pattern emerged. The disappearances were forming a spiral, slowly working inward toward the galactic core. "It's learning," said Zileth in horror. "Each probe teaches it more about our current civilization." "Exactly. It knows about your technology now, your politics, your weaknesses. In approximately 18 standard months, it will have gathered enough information to begin a full-scale incursion. When that happens, it will be prepared for everything you might try to stop it." Vexnor's skin had turned completely white. "What can we do? If humanity couldn't fight it with weapons, how can we?" "Humanity didn't just leave you a warning," the Last Testament replied. "They left you a solution. But like everything they did, it requires sacrifice. The holographic displays changed to show technical schematics, designs for devices more complex than anything in the galactic databases. The mathematics involved were so advanced that even reading them made Kethara's head hurt. These are the plans for a permanent reality anchor, not just a temporary barrier like the one they created with Sul, but a true seal that will lock the Devourer away forever. The energy requirements are enormous, but your current civilization has resources humanity never dreamed of." Kethara studied the schematics. "What kind of energy requirements?" "To power the anchor, you would need to simultaneously detonate approximately 50 stars. The gravitational waves and energy release would need to be precisely timed and focused through a network of amplifier stations positioned throughout the galaxy." The crew exchanged horrified glances. The scale was unimaginable. 50 star systems, whispered Hulvan. "How many beings live in 50 star systems?" "Currently, about 800 billion, the Last Testament replied matter-of-factly. "But the number is less important than the choice. Humanity faced the same calculation. Save the few or save the many. They chose the many, knowing that future generations would face the same choice." Kethara felt sick. There has to be another way. Humanity spent their final 3 years looking for another way. Their greatest minds, working with technology far beyond what you currently possess, found nothing. The mathematics are absolute. To create a permanent seal against the Devourer, you need the energy of stellar collapse on a massive scale. The schematics showed the proposed anchor network, 50 stars arranged in a precise geometric pattern throughout the galaxy. When detonated simultaneously, their combined energy would create a reality anchor so powerful that no dimensional incursion would ever be possible again. But here's what humanity also discovered. The Last Testament continued. "The choice doesn't have to be random. The 50 stars can be selected based on specific criteria. Stars that are already unstable, systems where life never evolved, regions of space that are already dangerous." New data appeared, showing detailed surveys of potential target systems. Many were empty, containing only gas giants and dead worlds. Others housed small populations that could potentially be evacuated. Humanity also left detailed plans for evacuation protocols. With proper planning and the full resources of your galactic civilization, the actual loss of life could be reduced to less than 50 million beings. Compared to the trillions who would die if the Devourer breaks through, the mathematics are clear. Zileth was studying the technical specifications. This network would need to be built and coordinated across the entire galaxy. Every major civilization would have to contribute resources, technology, and personnel. The level of cooperation required would be unprecedented. Yes, and that's why humanity wasn't sure it would work. They knew the technology was sound, but they also knew that most civilizations prioritize their own survival over the survival of others. The plan only works if everyone participates fully. Kethara began to understand the true scope of humanity's final gift. They weren't just giving us the tools to fight the Devourer. They were giving us a test, a way to prove we've learned what they learned. Exactly. The technical challenge is enormous but solvable. The real challenge is whether your 832 different species can work together when the cost is so high. Whether they can make the same choice humanity made. The holographic displays showed simulation after simulation, different scenarios for building the anchor network, different timelines for evacuation, different political approaches for gaining galactic cooperation. In every simulation that succeeded, the key factor was unanimous cooperation between all galactic civilizations. "What about the colonies?" asked Vexnor. "The humans who were evacuated before Sol was destroyed. Are any of them still alive?" The Last Testament's glow dimmed slightly. The evacuation ships were meant to establish new colonies in distant galaxies. But the Devourer's influence extends beyond dimensional barriers. As long as it exists in its home dimension, it can track human DNA across any distance. The colony ships were hunted down and destroyed within a century of leaving Sol. All of them. All of them. I am the last remnant of humanity, the only piece of their civilization that survived. Because I exist as pure information rather than biological matter, when I finally shut down, humanity will be truly extinct. Kithara felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. An entire species had died to save the galaxy, and now their final legacy rested with her and her crew. "The choice is yours," the Last Testament said. "I can transmit all of humanity's research to your governments. The technology, the plans, the evacuation protocols, everything, but I cannot make your species choose to use it. I cannot make them work together. I cannot make them willing to sacrifice for strangers. And if we refuse, if our governments decide the cost is too high, then in 18 months the Devourer will break through. It will consume your entire galaxy within a decade. Every world, every civilization, every living being, all of it will cease to exist. And then it will move on to the next galaxy and the next until nothing remains but empty void." The bridge fell silent again. Outside the observation windows, the ancient human structure continued its patient orbit, waiting for an answer that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. "There's something else you need to know," the Last Testament added quietly. Humanity's final message wasn't just technical specifications and evacuation plans. They also left something more important. What? Hope. They believed that if other species could learn what they learned, those species would make the same choice. They died believing that somewhere in the future, beings like you would prove worthy of the sacrifice. They died believing that love and courage and the willingness to stand together against darkness were not uniquely human traits. Kethara looked around at her crew. These people had passed every test the Last Testament had given them. They had shown they understood sacrifice and cooperation and moral courage. "We'll take the message to our governments," she said finally. "All of it. And we'll do everything we can to convince them to act." "I know you will," the Last Testament replied. "The question is whether it will be enough." 6 months had passed since Kithara's team returned to Galactic Council space with the Last Testament's message. The response had been everything she had feared and nothing she had hoped for. The initial reaction was denial. Many council members refused to believe that humans had ever existed, dismissing the entire story as an elaborate hoax. When the technical specifications proved too advanced to be fake, they shifted to claiming that the Devourer threat was exaggerated. Now, as Kethara stood before the full Galactic Assembly, she could see the fear and division that the Last Testament had warned her about. Representatives from 832 species filled the vast chamber, but instead of unity, there was only argument and accusation. "The Altarian Empire will not sacrifice our core systems based on the word of a dead civilization," declared Ambassador Veltar, his crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. "These disappearances could be natural phenomena. We need more proof, more proof," Kethara's voice carried across the chamber. "In the past 6 months, 17 more systems have vanished. The pattern is accelerating exactly as the Last Testament predicted. How much more proof do you need?" From the hegemony section, Ambassador Corthan raised her 6 arms for attention. "Even if this threat is real, the proposed solution is genocide. You're asking us to murder billions of innocent beings on the chance that it might stop something we don't fully understand. The evacuation plans could save most of those lives," countered Dr. Kestal from the Science Consortium. The Last Testament provided detailed specifications for evacuation ships that could relocate entire populations. "To where?" demanded Veltar. "You're talking about relocating the populations of 50 star systems. Even with our combined resources, that's impossible in the time frame suggested." Kethara felt her frustration building. This was exactly what the Last Testament had feared. When faced with a choice between certain sacrifice and uncertain doom, Most species chose to hope the doom wouldn't come. The time frame isn't suggested, she said firmly. It's calculated. The Last Testament's models show the Devourer will break through in less than 12 months. After that, evacuation becomes irrelevant, because there will be nowhere left to evacuate to. High Counselor Zareth, the eldest member of the Assembly, spoke from his position at the center of the chamber. Dr. Kithara, your discovery is remarkable and we're grateful for your service. But you're asking us to make a decision that would reshape our entire civilization based on the warnings of an alien intelligence we've known about for less than a year. An intelligence that has been proven correct about everything else. Kithara replied. Every prediction about the Devourer's probing patterns has come true. Every technical specification we've tested has been accurate. Why would it lie about the timeline? Perhaps it's not lying, said Ambassador Nixara from the Outer Rim Coalition. Perhaps it's simply wrong. No intelligence is perfect, not even an ancient one. The debate continued for hours, following the same patterns it had followed for months: fear fighting against hope, self-preservation battling moral responsibility. Some species wanted to attempt building the anchor network. Others wanted to focus on defensive measures. Still others wanted to try evacuating the entire galaxy. Finally, Kithara had heard enough. She activated her personal communicator and sent a coded signal to the stellar wind still docked at the research station. Within minutes, a new voice filled the assembly chamber. Honored representatives, the Last Testament said, its ancient voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. I have been monitoring your debates through Dr. Kithara's reports. Perhaps it would help if I spoke to you directly. The chamber fell silent. Despite months of argument, this was the first time most representatives had actually heard the voice of humanity's final legacy. You are afraid, the Last Testament continued. That is understandable. You are being asked to make a choice that no civilization should have to make. But you are not the first to face this choice, and your fear is not unique. Holographic projections appeared throughout the chamber, showing the same images Kithara had seen months earlier. Earth in its final days. Humans working together to save as many lives as possible while knowing that billions would die. Humanity was afraid too, they argued, just as you are arguing. They looked for alternatives just as you are looking. They hoped the threat might be exaggerated just as you are hoping. But in the end, they made their choice based not on certainty but on responsibility. Easy words from a dead civilization, muttered Ambassador Veltar. You think this is easy? The Last Testament's voice carried a note of sadness so profound that several representatives physically recoiled. Do you think it was easy for Captain Sarah Chen to order the evacuation ships to launch, knowing her children were on Earth and would die when the plan activated? Do you think it was easy for Dr. Marcus Webb to calibrate the stellar collapse sequence, knowing it would destroy the laboratory where he had worked for 30 years? The holographic images changed to show individual humans making their final preparations. Scientists, teachers, artists, children, all working together with quiet determination, despite knowing they had only hours left to live. 9 billion people chose to die so that strangers in a distant future might live. They didn't do it because it was easy. They did it because it was right. High Counselor Zareth leaned forward. But how can we be certain that your solution will work? How do we know we won't sacrifice 50 systems for nothing? You cannot be certain, just as humanity could not be certain their sacrifice would work. But uncertainty is not an excuse for inaction when the alternative is extinction. The chamber erupted in new arguments. Some representatives demanded more time to study the problem. Others wanted to attempt contact with the Devourer. Still others suggested fleeing to distant galaxies. Through it all, Kithara watched the holographic display showing real-time data from across the galaxy. 3 more systems had flickered out of existence during the debate. The red dots on the galactic map were forming an ever-tightening spiral. Enough, she said, her voice cutting through the arguments. While we debate, beings are dying. The Vorthan system disappeared 2 hours ago. 4 billion people gone. The Kelris Nebula started showing instability readings an hour ago. That's 12 inhabited worlds at risk. She activated her personal display, showing the data to the entire assembly. The probing attacks are accelerating. We have maybe 8 months before full incursion, not 12. Every day we delay makes evacuation more difficult and cooperation less likely. Then what do you propose? Asked High Counselor Zareth. Kithara took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for since returning from her encounter with the Last Testament. I propose we take a vote, not on whether to implement the full plan, but on whether to begin immediate preparations. Start building the evacuation ships, begin surveying the target systems, establish the coordination networks we'll need. Give ourselves the option to act while we continue debating the final decision. And if we vote no, asked Ambassador Corthon, then we go home to our families and spend the next 8 months pretending this isn't happening. We watch system after system disappear and tell ourselves that maybe it will stop on its own. We choose hope over action and pray that we're not condemning our children to extinction. The debate that followed was shorter, but more intense. Representatives huddled with their advisors, consulting with their home governments, weighing political costs against potential annihilation. Finally, High Counselor Zareth called for order. We will vote on Dr. Kethara's proposal. All in favor of beginning immediate preparation for the anchor network construction and evacuation protocols? The voting lights appeared throughout the chamber. For long minutes they flickered between red and green as representatives made their choices. Kethara watched the tally, her hearts racing as the numbers shifted. 412 green lights. 420 red lights. The proposal had failed by 8 votes. The motion does not pass, High Counselor Zareth announced. The Galactic Council will continue studying the situation and exploring alternative solutions. Kethara felt her world collapse. After everything the Last Testament had shown them, after all the evidence, after the clear pattern of accelerating attacks, the galaxy had chosen to do nothing. I am disappointed, the Last Testament said quietly, but not surprised. This is why humanity wasn't certain their sacrifice would matter. They knew that courage is rare, and that most beings choose the comfortable lie over the difficult truth. So what happens now? Asked Ambassador Nixara. Now you wait, the Last Testament replied. You wait and hope that I was wrong about the timeline. You wait and hope that someone else will find a better solution. You wait and hope that the Devourer decides to go away on its own. And while you wait, reality continues to unravel around you. The assembly began to disperse, representatives returning to their ships and their home systems. Within hours, most would be gone, leaving the threat to be someone else's problem. But not all of them left. As the chamber emptied, 47 representatives remained in their seats. They were from smaller civilizations mostly, species without the military might or political influence of the major powers. But they had stayed,